Professor Thabo Mbeki.
I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. My body has frozen in our frosts and in our latter-day snows. It has thawed in the warmth of our sunshine and melted in the heat of the midday sun. The crack and the rumble of the summer thunders, lashed by startling lightning, have been a cause both of trembling and of hope. The fragrances of nature have been as pleasant to us as the sight of the wild blooms of the citizens of the veld. The dramatic shapes of the Dragon's Back, the soil-colored waters of the Likwa, Iqeli, Notugek, and the sands of the Kalahari have all been panels of the set on the natural stage on which we act out the foolish deeds of the theater of the day. At times, and in fear, I have wondered whether I should concede equal citizenship of our country to the leopard and the lion, the elephant and the springbok, the hyena, the black mamba, and the pestilential mosquito. A human presence among all of these, a feature on the face of our native land just defined, I know that none dare challenge me when I say I am an African. I am the grandchild of the warrior men and women that influenced the Kukuni land. Patriots at Tsetshwayo and Mpepu took to battle. The soldiers Mushweshwe and Ngumunyane taught never to dishonor the cause of freedom. I am the child of Nongause. I am he who made it possible to trade in the world markets in diamonds, in gold, in the same food for which our stomachs yearn. Being part of all of these people, and in the knowledge that none dares contest that assertion, I shall claim that I'm an African. Today, it feels good to be an African.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture. Can we please have everyone come on closer down, s'il vous plaît? Bonsoir, bienvenue. Pour tous ceux qui sont assis derrière, si vous pouvez, s'il vous plaît, vous déplacer et nous joindre plus bas. Okay. Once again, good afternoon, esteemed guests, dignitaries, scholars, and of course, all members of the public who have joined us today in the beautiful city of Conakry, as well as those following us, of course, viewing our proceedings virtually. I am Madame Sako Fatima Koroma, I will be your program director for this important day and delightful event. We gather here in this dynamic city, Conakry, Republic of Guinea, for the 13th Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture as a first outside of South Africa, truly manifesting the TMF's commitment to being a Pan-African organization. Before we formally start, it is only befitting that we start with our opening prayers to invoke blessings and guidance for our today's event. May I humbly invite our respected Imam Bangura and our Reverend, the Catholic Bishop, Reverend Raphael Sano, on the stage to lead us with an opening prayer. Their words will help to set the tone for our discussion and ensure we approach and subject matter with wisdom and compassion. Imam and Reverend. Please welcome Imam Bangura and Reverend Sanyo.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلق الله محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Monsieur le Président, Thabo Mbeki, Excellence Thabo Mbeki, Monsieur le Ministre des Affaires étrangères et des Guinéens de l'étranger, Son Excellence Mori Sanda Kouyaté, Mesdames et Messieurs, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Je voudrais d'abord remercier et féliciter cette assemblée d'avoir choisi d'ouvrir cette cérémonie par le nom d'Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Le prophète Mohammed sallallahu alayhi wa sallam nous dit Kullu amrin dhibalin la yuftahu bi dhikrillah fahuwa abtar. Il dit toute chose importante qui n'est pas commencée par le nom de Dieu est inutile. Donc Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, cette assemblée a choisi votre nom pour débuter cette cérémonie. Je vous prie, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, de bénir cette assemblée et d'y mettre la baraka. Bénir toutes les activités qui vont se passer ici ce soir. Allahumma salli wa barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallayta wa barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim fil alamin innaka hamidun majid. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم احسن عاقبتنا في الأمور كلها وأجرنا من خزي الدنيا وعذاب الآخرة اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضاه اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضاه اللهم خذ بناصيتنا إلى ما فيه صلاح البلاد والعباد اللهم خذ بناصيتنا وبنواصينا إلى ما فيه صلاح العباد والعباد ربنا اقسم لنا من خشيتك ما تحول به بيننا وبين معصيتك ومن طاعتك ما تبلغنا به جنتك ومن اليقين ما تحون به علينا مصائب الدنيا ومتعنا اللهم بأسمائنا وأبصارنا وقواتنا ما أحييتنا واجعله الوارث منا واجعل ثارنا على من ظلمنا وانصرنا على من أعادانا ولا تجعل مصيبتنا في ديننا ولا تجعل الدنيا أكبر همنا ولا مبلغ علمنا ولا إلى النار مصيرنا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
This is the minister in charge of religious affairs of a country of Guinea, and he just made some blessings and prayers. This is the other prayer and blessing from the brothers in Christianity.
Toi qui as dit dans Proverbe 16:3, recommande tes œuvres à l'Éternel.
He is now blessing and citing the verses of the Bible.
Une joie pour moi d'être là.
God, the Lord is once we are here. I want to speak to you directly. And
Seigneur, tu as créé ce jour et tu l'as créé
God,
merveilleux.
Lord, you chose this day for
C'est toi
us.
qui as fait les autorités.
You made everything possible.
Nous
and
te remercions
stance.
pour la vie des autorités
We
de ce
would
pays.
like to thank you for having given us birth.
Nous prions que tu les fortifies.
We
Nous
pray that
prions
you
que tu
fortify
les
them
encourages.
and you
Nous
encourage them.
prions que tu veilles sur eux.
We
Nous
pray
prions,
that
Seigneur,
you protect them and watch
que
over
tu leur
them
donnes la sagesse,
and give them
l'intelligence
your wisdom
de
and
diriger
the
ce
lights
pays
and lead
dans ta
the
volonté.
country in the
Et
right
nous
path.
prions
And we
que
pray
la
that
transition se passe
transition
dans d'excellentes conditions
in the very
et
good
que la
conditions
violence qui a commencé dans le pays,
and
que
the
tu
violence
apaises et
started in the
enlèves cette
country
violence au nom de
be
Jésus-Christ de
stopped
Nazareth.
and completely
Seigneur,
wiped away.
nous
The
continuons à
Lord,
prier
we will continue
pour
to pray
l'autorité.
for
Parce
you
que l'Afrique du Sud et la Guinée,
because South Africa
depuis le
and Guinea,
départ,
from the
avec les
beginning,
premiers leaders,
with our
les
first
deux pays
leaders,
ont collaboré
have
ensemble
collaborated
jusqu'à
together
l'indépendance de l'Afrique
up
du Sud.
to the
C'est une joie pour nous
South
de
African
voir
independence.
aujourd'hui le
And
second
today
président
we
de
see the
l'Afrique du
second
Sud
African
dans ce pays pour
the second president of South
créer,
Africa
pour
creating
implanter une
and
fondation,
representing this
ce qui n'a
foundation
jamais été fait
has
depuis
never
leur
existed
indépendance.
before. We pray
Te
that you give
disons
them all the
merci.
strength and wisdom
Et nous te
and lightning.
confions, Seigneur, cette
And we
fondation.
entrusted you this
Nous voulons
responsibility
que cette
that
fondation
when the
réussisse
foundation
et que
succeeds
les hommes qui vont
and
être
that all
choisis
people that
pour
will be
diriger
chosen
cette
to
fondation
lead this foundation
dirigent
dirige
dans l'intégrité,
in
dans
integrity
l'honnêteté,
and
avec
honesty, so
beaucoup
that
de sagesse et d'intelligence au
both
nom de Jésus-Christ de
intelligence and
Nazareth.
wisdom prevails
Merci, Père.
and lead them
Merci
to the
pour
right
tes
direction.
rois. Nous te remercions pour
We
la vie
really thank you
du président
that
Thabo Mbeki.
President Thabo Mbeki,
Nous avons entendu
that
parler
we have heard
les
and we
œuvres
saw
qu'il a accomplies en Afrique
and
du
all
Sud
things and work that he did in South Africa,
pour aider la
that
Guinée
he
à
help us
réussir dans la
lead
transition
us here
au
in
nom de
Guinea
Jésus-Christ
to
de
succeed in the
Nazareth.
transition of
Nous
Guinea.
te demandons, Père,
We ask
que
you
sa voix passe
that
partout
his voice be
où il sera,
heard
afin
everywhere
qu'il
he
soit
goes
honoré, qu'il
and
soit
anywhere he will be
respecté
at
au
any
nom de
time
Jésus-Christ de
on
Nazareth.
behalf of Jesus
Notre
Christ,
ministre
in the
des
name
Affaires
of Jesus
étrangères
Christ.
vient auprès du président de la République.
Come
Il a commencé à
next
faire un
to
bon
the
travail.
president
Que tu
of
l'aides à continuer
Guinea,
ce travail.
that
Que tu le
he be
protèges, que
helped
tu
to
le
be
gardes, que tu
completing this
protèges sa
work
famille, que tu gardes sa
so
famille.
that he
Merci,
faith
Seigneur. Nous voulons
in the
imiter
name
tes
of
Nous
God
prions
again.
que
We
tu
really pray
enlèves
that
la violence en
you
Guinée
take
et que
out
tu
and wipe
envoies
away
la
all
paix.
violence in
Tous
Guinea
les
so that we
Guinéens
come back to
s'entendent,
peace. Peace be
travaillent
restored
ensemble
and work
parce
together
que c'est
so
toi
that
qui as fait cette
because
Guinée
you are
et
the
c'est
man
toi qui
who
as
made
fait la
Guinea
population guinéenne,
and
c'est
the population
toi
of
qui as fait
Guinea.
la terre guinéenne.
You are
C'est
the
pour
one
que
who created
les Guinéens
Guinea
soient
and
heureux.
all Guineans
Tu as
be happy
enrichi
and
leur sol.
enrich
Nous
the soil and
voulons
the
qu'il y ait
territory
qui nous sentent
so that we won't have any
que
ethnicity
nous parlons un
problems,
seul langage,
that we
parce que c'est
speak
toi qui
only
as
one
créé les
language
langues, c'est toi qui as
on
créé
one
les
word.
ethnies.
You
On
have
parle
created the
tout
one.
simplement des
We
Guinéens
only
dans
speak
ce
of
pays,
Guineans
au
in
nom de
Guinea
Jésus-Christ de Nazareth.
in the name of
Merci,
Jesus
Seigneur.
Christ.
Toute la gloire
Thank
à toi.
you,
Et nous te
Jesus
recommandons
Christ.
ce projet
All the glory
que
is
ça
to you.
réussisse parfaitement
We
pour la
pray
gloire
that
de
everything
ton nom.
succeeds
Au nom de
in
Jésus-Christ de Nazareth.
the name
Amen.
of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Be glory, be sanctified. Amen.
Merci. Thank you, Imam Kamara and Bishop Sanyo, for your inspiring words. In honor of our shared African unity and spirit, let us now rise and pay respect to our shared heritage and dreams with the playing of the national anthems. We will first be proud to hear the strains of the national anthem of the Republic of Guinea, and will be followed by the national anthem of the African Union. How's the sound?
Thank
here today, we are reminded of the call made by our African political leaders in 1963. The 25th of May must be used to focus on advancing the goals of the continent has set for itself. We honor this commitment to our beloved continent and the diverse people who call it home. It is particularly significant that we find ourselves in Conakry, Guinea this year, the first time ever for this event to be outside of South Africa. This shift speaks to the Pan-African vision the Thabo Mbeki Foundation embodies and is committed to. Guinea is a nation of rich history and potential, and it stands as a beacon of hope in our collective African journey. I would like to take a moment to thank our generous sponsors, Anglo Gold Ashanti, the African Development Bank, and MTN Group. Without their support, this event wouldn't be possible. Anglo Gold Ashanti, the African Development Bank, and MTN Group, your commitment to the promotion of African unity, the development, and intellectual discourse is truly commendable. We appreciate your contribution and your shared vision in creating a prosperous Africa. This afternoon, we are in for an intellectual treat. We will hear Professor Siba Grovogi, a highly esteemed Guinean political scientist and scholar, who will enlighten us on the challenges of fragility and security in West Africa and how these intersect with the economic development. His insights are a paramount of importance as we consider the future of our continent and how we can collectively move towards progress and prosperity. Today's lecture is not merely about listening. It is an invitation for all of us to engage critically and thoughtfully, to question, to learn, and to imagine a future where our continent is defined by peace, prosperity, and progress. This event is also a testament of the power of knowledge and dialogue as a catalyst for the transformative change. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that our gathering takes place amidst the reality and challenges of the rapidly evolving global context. As we navigate through these uncertain times, let us remember that through unity, dialogue, collaboration, we will overcome the obstacles in our path. Let us remember the words of the great Ghanaian scholar and Pan-Africanist, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who once said, "I am not an African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me." As we delve into today's proceedings, let us keep these words close to our hearts as a reminder of our shared African unity, our shared challenges, and our shared aspirations. To remind us of our roots, we've seen the video called I Am Africa. The purpose of that video was to remind us of our roots, our shared identity, our collective hope for the future, to pay attention to where we should be heading towards. Now, I would like to invite the minister. Thank you. So the video has passed already, so sorry. Thank you. Your attention is much appreciated. For now, formally welcome us and to share his thoughts to his significant event. I am honored to invite to the podium the esteemed Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Morisanda Koyate.
Est-ce que la traduction est assurée pour le président? C'est bon?
Yes, is it good? Is everything all right? Do you hear me? Can you hear me? I want to make sure everything is all right. Okay. Can you hear me? Is everything all right? Can you? Merci. Thank you. Your Excellency and dear brother, Mr. Thabo Mbeki. Your Excellency, ambassadors, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, the occasion that governs us. Merci d'être venu en Guinée. Thank you for coming in. I have never a line of a mission.
Artificial division between francophone and anglophone, so we cannot talk here Swahili or Mandingo or Fulani or Kwasa. We should not need to have translation, but this is our past. So allow me, President, to speak in French because most of the participants are francophone. Excellence, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs, au nom du chef de l'État, Son Excellence Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, le président de la transition, le président du CNRD,
President of Transition, I would like to wish you a welcome in Guinea on behalf of President Mamadi Doumbouya on the Guinean soil or territory. When former President Sékou Touré said no to the French, it was both for the entire Africa and Guinea itself. It's an immense honor for the Guinean
pour
people
le gouvernement guinéen,
and the entire Guinean
et
government,
singulièrement pour le président de la transition,
and
le
particularly for the president of transition, Colonel Mamadi
de
Doumbouya,
voir Son Excellence
to see
Thabo Mbeki
His Excellency President Thabo Mbeki
choisir pour sa fondation
coming here
la
in
terre
Guinea
africaine
with his
de Guinée
foundation
pour célébrer
to celebrate
pour la première fois
for the
hors
very
d'Afrique
first
du Sud,
time
la journée de l'Afrique.
the African Union.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
c'est vous qui avez choisi la Guinée
it's you who chose Guinea.
pour cela.
That's right.
Vous ne vous êtes pas trompé du tout.
You did not mistake at all.
Nul autre pays en Afrique
No other country in Africa
ne peut se réclamer
would claim
du président Nelson Mandela
President Nelson Mandela
que cette terre africaine
that
panafricaine
Guinea
de Guinée.
itself, we have the right
Monsieur le
and we
Président,
are own people
ici,
to claim him, to have
On ne
rights
vous
on
souhaite
him.
pas la bienvenue.
We wish him
On vous
welcome.
montre votre place dans votre case.
We would not have put you in the right house here.
Le président Nelson Mandela
If
était
President
là,
Nelson Mandela
ici, dans ce pays,
were here
avec votre propre vénéré père,
with all your own
Monsieur Govan
fight
Beki, pour sceller avec le président Ahmed Sékou Touré
to seal with former President
le
Sékou Touré
panafricanisme, la lutte
to set up
pour
and
la
fight
libération de l'Afrique,
for
Et la lutte
Pan-Africanism
pour la
and fight
libération
against
de l'Afrique du Sud.
colonialism and the
l'apartheid.
entry of the white people on the continent.
Nous étions jeunes,
I was very young,
mais nous pouvons nous souvenir.
but I know what was happening.
Tous les samedis, je le disais ici,
And every other single country in Africa were having refuge in Guinea.
tous les samedis,
Every
tous
Saturday,
les élèves de la Guinée sortaient pour faire le tour de nos villes.
he would go
À
out
Yombo,
and
à
try to
Zérékoré, à
tour
Kankan,
the city.
à Labé, à Kindia.
Would go to
Partout.
Kindia, to
Les
Labi,
samedis,
everywhere on Saturdays.
Nous avions un rituel en Guinée.
And he
Sortir
used to do this, and
Marcher.
he tried to train on that.
en disant
And
libérez Mandela, libérez
he was
Mandela,
chanting
libérez
and making a
Mandela.
slogan,
C'était
"Free Nelson
Abat
Mandela, free
l'apartheid,
Mandela,
abat l'apartheid.
Abba apartheid, fall down to
Nous avons
apartheid."
grandi avec ça
We grew up in that, with
jusqu'à la
chanting that,
libération du président
until
Nelson Mandela.
they set President
C'est
Mandela free.
Jusqu'à ce qu'il se soit libéré.
Until he set himself
On
free.
ne les a pas libérés, ils se sont libérés du joug.
They set themselves free. We didn't free them.
Je suis allé en Afrique du Sud à Robben Island.
I went to South Africa in Robben Island,
J'ai vu
and I saw on my
la
eyes
prison dans laquelle,
the African Union, the universe.
est-ce que d'ailleurs c'était vivre,
And was it him
croupissait le président Mandela
where,
et ses
Man-
compagnons.
where Mandela was? President Mandela.
Une cage
Like
de
a
2
cage.
mètres sur 4 pendant 27 ans.
But
Et cela n'a pas plié leur volonté
and that did not
leur
deter them
amour
from
pour
their
l'Afrique,
goodwill
leur
and their
amour
determination
pour les Africains.
to set South Africa free.
Et après,
Peace,
ils sont sortis
they went
Robert.
out
de cette épreuve inhumaine de l'apartheid.
from this inhuman
Chacun
fight and
pouvait
inhuman
imaginer
struggle,
la haine qu'ils devraient avoir
the hatred that we should
contre
have
ceux
had
qui les ont torturés
against those who tortured them in the past
pour rien.
for nothing.
Ils sortent,
But they did not
ils ont
retaliate.
étonné le monde entier.
And that there's that also on behalf of
Ils
Guinea.
disent, nous pardonnons,
We say we forgive.
nous acceptons
We
d'avoir été
accept.
les sacrifices
We have
pour la
been,
création
we accept
d'une Afrique
that as a
unie,
sacrifice.
dans une Afrique unie.
And we want to do that in a united Africa.
Et c'est cela.
That's it.
Vous, Monsieur le Président,
You, Mr. President,
vous avez grandi à l'ombre de la lutte.
you grew up beside or alongside the fight.
Dans l'apartheid, Et vous avez grandi dans la lutte
You
contre
grew
l'apartheid.
up in the fight and struggle in apartheid
C'est
system.
pourquoi
That's why
vous occupez,
you now
et c'est un honneur pour vous et moi aujourd'hui,
hold a position, you and I, in
à
Africa,
cet instant même.
at this point, at
Vous
this
êtes le
time.
digne successeur direct
You
du
are the
président Nelson
right
Mandela.
and
Cela ne fait pas
rightful
de
successor of President Mandela. Legitimate successor.
Vous devez en être très fier.
You have to be proud of
Et
that.
à côté de vous, je suis aussi
And next to
un
you,
peu fier
I am very proud
d'avoir été
to have been
élu, choisi comme
and
le
chosen
récipiendaire
as
du prix Nelson
the
Mandela des Nations
recipient
Unies en
and
2000.
beneficiaries of the Nelson Mandela
Très fier
Prize
au nom de mon
of
pays.
the United Nations on
Mais
behalf
ce
of
prix,
peace.
Monsieur le Président, n'était pas pour moi, c'était pour le peuple de Guinée.
That was not for me only, it was only for the Guinean
Alors,
people and population.
lorsque vous choisissez la Guinée pour
So when you
célébrer
choose Guinea to
la
start
journée
your
de
tour,
l'Afrique,
on your
l'unité de
implement
l'Afrique,
your foundation,
vous ne vous êtes pas trompé.
I think you did not
C'est
mistake at
pourquoi
all.
le président m'a chargé
That's why President
de vous remercier.
Doumbouya entrusted me and asked me to
De vous
thank you,
dire que désormais,
that to tell you that
la
as of today,
fondation Thabo Mbeki,
the Thabo Mbeki Foundation
une deuxième patrie, c'est
has
la
a
patrie
second
guinéenne,
home,
ici.
that is Guinea. His second
Nous mettrons
headquarters,
tout à
that is
l'œuvre.
in Guinea.
Tout ce qui est humainement possible
Any event
pour faire rayonner
or happening that should occur
votre fondation.
that can
Parce que
help
votre fondation,
enlighten or brighten your
elle
foundation
a des objectifs très clairs.
will be our common fight, and will be going in that respect.
La lutte
This fight
contre la
against apartheid
prévarication,
and
la
enslavement,
lutte contre la corruption.
against corruption.
Vous en êtes le champion.
That's one of these stronghold words.
Nous en parlions hier, vous et moi.
It's what we are fighting against. as well.
Mais
But-
peut-être que votre position d'aujourd'hui est meilleure à la
But
position du président.
your
en exercice,
position right now may be better than
parce que vos
yesterday,
forces sont libérées.
because
Votre voix est libérée.
right
Vous êtes
now your
libéré de la
powers
diplomatie
are
classique.
somehow
Vous êtes
di-
dans la lutte aujourd'hui.
you are
Et dans cette lutte, la Guinée
you are
et son
still
président,
fighting,
le colonel Mamadi Doumbouya,
and
et son
President
gouvernement
Colonel
sont
Mamadi
à vos
Doumbouya.
côtés. Encore une fois,
Again,
bienvenue dans votre
welcome
patrie.
to Guinea.
Bienvenue dans votre pays.
Welcome back to your
Et
country.
au nom du président, au nom
And
du
on
peuple
behalf
de
of
Guinée,
President and on behalf of the
Merci
Guinean population,
pour
we
la
say thank you.
considération que vous faites à la Guinée.
Thank you for the population you have chosen.
Ici, c'est la terre de Myriam Makeba.
This is the land of Miriam Makeba.
Cette scène, ici.
Here, that was her
Elle a joué
scene.
ici
This
des
stage,
dizaines,
she has
des
occupied it
centaines
several
de fois.
times.
Ici.
This is where she has been producing and performing.
C'est ici
This is
qu'elle
where
s'adressait au monde. C'est
she
ici
has been speaking to the
qu'elle
world.
s'adressait
From
à la
this
patrie,
very same stage
C'est
where
de
I
cette scène
stand,
qu'elle combattait.
this is from where she was fighting and combating
L'apartheid.
South African's
Alors,
apartheid system.
Cette scène,
This
elle
stage
est à Nelson Mandela.
is
Cette
brings to
scène-
Mandela,
Elle est à votre père,
is
Govan Mbeki.
yours as well.
Cette terre,
This land
elle est à vous,
is
la
yours.
scène. Et c'est d'ici que vous
This
allez vous
stage
adresser au monde entier.
that
Et
has
le monde
been
vous entendra
addressing
parce
the
que c'est
entire
ici
world, and the world has
vous
also
entendez
been listening
Myriam
from
Makeba.
here.
Je vous remercie.
I would like to thank you. You did not mistake. Welcome to Guinea, Mr. President.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Thank you, Minister, for your profound words. It
Thank
is
you,
now
Mr.
with immense
Minister,
honor
for your
and respect
very
that I invite
town
a beacon of
speech
leadership and wisdom, President
and
Thabo
the
Mbeki, to
enlightenment
share his
and the wisdom
insight
that it
and to
has
introduce our esteemed speaker for this year's lecture, President Thabo Mbeki.
Thank you very much, Thabo, Program Director. And thank you very much, Your Excellency, Minister Kuyate, for that very warm welcome. And I must also say thanks a lot to His Excellency the President, Dumbuya, for receiving us very well yesterday. And we continue to extend to him our respect. So, Honorable Minister, Your Excellency, Your Excellencies, ambassadors and members of the diplomatic corps, and dear friends, as people have said, the Africa Day lecture has been given, now extended, delivered for 12 years. And we've done all of that within South Africa. But indeed, we're always conscious of the fact that this was not a South African lecture, but an African lecture. And indeed, I must also say that our friends across the continent have raised that thing with us for many times, to say we must not deliver this lecture only from South Africa, but also from other countries on our continent. And Your Excellency Minister, indeed, we are very, very glad indeed that we could come to Guinea as the first country after all of these other 12 years in South Africa. And indeed, you are quite right, Minister, that this was not an accident, because Guinea is a particular place. Guinea is a particular place in the struggle for our own liberation. It's a unique place, and indeed, we were privileged ourselves, a privilege to come here for the purpose of this lecture. And I must say, not to take too much time, Your Excellency, because there are many other people around the world who are listening. I'm sure they are very impatient to hear our lecturer, our esteemed lecturer. Very, very glad indeed that we have as our lecturer today, our esteemed lecturer, the Africa Day lecture, Professor Krovoki, who is with us here, born in Guinea, and an outstanding African scholar who is teaching international relations theory in African political thought at Cornell University in the United States. Your Excellency Minister, whenever we've asked people to deliver this lecture, it's also always on the basis of our respect for their intellect, our respect for their commitment to Pan-Africanism, our respect for their commitment to honesty. And so that's been our assessment of Professor Krovoki, that here we would have an outstanding African lecturer, an esteemed lecturer, who would say something valuable not only to us in this hall, but throughout our continent and the African diaspora, say something very significant about the state of the continent and what we need to do, essentially to achieve the renaissance of the continent. To give an indication, Your Excellency Minister, about the thinking of our esteemed lecturer, Professor Krovoki, I want to quote, I hope it won't be too long, a response he got to a question that was posed to him in 2021. And the question was, how has the way you understand the world changed over time? And what or who promoted the most significant shifts in your thinking? And this was part of his response, Your Excellency. He said the war in Iraq shattered the window of opportunity after the collapse of the Cold War. The idea that we could return to the basis upon which the new world under the UN Charter was founded, multilateralism, mutual coexistence, mutual respect, rule of law, everybody abiding by international law, etc. The Iraq War, for me, closed that window. And what was frightening was that in official Europe, there was actually no situation, no sanction at any level, no any unambiguous condemnation afterwards by any incorporated European body. And they say all of those things have echoes. If African people can permit themselves to say, quote, we don't care about the International Criminal Court, unquote, it's partly because of Iraq. The lack of consequences for it led many to the conclusion that there was no universal justice, universal humanitarian morality, universal jurisdiction. European doublespeak around the world also said this a lot about European self-doubts about United States unilateralism. It was also caused many to rethink whatever expectations they had about the emergent role of Europe in the post-Cold War era. The debates about the fallout of the Iraq War were as much about Europe as they were about the US, because people had hoped that Europe could rally around traditions such as the Geneva Conventions, the norms against aggression, and so on. He said at some point, Bush went to war against the public sentiment of America because the majority were opposed to it. But still, he had those core groups in the public that were for it and thought they could afford immunities and the right to a re-election. He's saying, Your Excellency, that we need to define for ourselves, to think for ourselves. And he's giving an assessment here of the war of Iraq, what happened there, and what it means for us as Africans. And not to be deluded by the mere use of words about multilateralism, mutual coexistence, mutual respect, rule of law, when people are actually, the people who pronounce those ideas very forcefully are precisely the same people who violate them. We're very, very glad that we have him, Professor Groboge, a Guinean, to talk to us today, to deliver for us today, the Africa Day lecture. And I'm sure he will speak as much with such honesty about our continent as he did then when he answered that question. Professor Groboge, please. Thanks a lot.
That was a strong speech from President Thabo Mbeki, and trying to set the stage for Professor Groboge, who will have a special speech very, very shortly.
Excellence, Monsieur le Président,
His Excellency,
Thabo
Mr.
Mbeki.
President,
Excellence, Monsieur le Ministre,
His Excellency, Mr. Minister of Foreign Affairs,
Excellence les ambassadeurs,
Excellency Ambassadors,
et Madame les ambassadrices,
ladies and gentlemen,
honorables invités,
honorable guests,
je m'appelle
my name is Siba Zachalu Groboge. I was born in Guinea. I was a graduate from Gamal Abdel Nasser University, promotion Behanzin.
je suis très attaché à la Guinée.
Always loved Guinea,
Aujourd'hui, j'appartiens à un groupe
and have maintained strong tie to it.
qui se réunit depuis 2 ans et demi maintenant.
Today, I have belong to a strong group of Guineans.
C'est au nom de ce groupe
We have now for 2.5 years of wait,
en Guinée,
means that we have to come to Guinea to do something specific.
notre but,
From north to south,
envisager de meilleures institutions
we envisage better institutions. Our themes have been consistent with the themes of today, an African Renaissance. Before going further in my speech, please allow me to set a special word. I am a professor elect. But I have very come here. I spoke about an institution that is specialized, and I told you how. Microphone. Has His Excellency said it? I am an African. I am South African. Proud to be among the first. I remember that I have always been among the first. Live in the land where it all began, Africa. Accompanying the first companion of Moses, Zaporaji, the first witness to crucifixion, other than those who committed the ultimate sin of it, Simon or Cyril. I am proud to be with Bilal al-Abashi. Africa gave birth to the people who rendered Africa's languages more than melodious. The cultural expressions of enslaved Africans from the Caribbeans influenced in Asian Banaj, Achin, Chen Yureneng, the one that was the founder of the revolutionary of China under Sun Yat-sen, just to mention that. Palmares lasted is a formerly enslaved Africans formed the first modern republic. I know there is no single republic in the earth that resembles it. They had a very special experience. Unmistakably, it existed longer than United Soviet Union. But the longer of Auschwitz, we will always refer to them as a reference, because when you remember as an Africans, we don't remember, we don't know where we are, and we also try to refer to them as a model. Africans, for example, I know we are all centered about that. Dar es Salaam, which is also the language is Swahili. Illustration of cosmopolitan life in lingua franca. We don't remember that. We don't know where it comes from. The Roman Empire included Africa, the precept of all human rights. First, they used the word slavery before getting into the laws. When Palmares were trying to forbid in 1609, the founder of modern letters, social sciences or arts, were among them. And we as African unions we try to go before the successors of on the past, not to leave behind for people in Africa who are not, let's say, visitable.
Nous n'avons jamais abandonné notre
We never abandon our African land.
Jamais.
Never, ever.
Nous n'avons pas permis aux autres de nous définir.
We didn't lose our roots and culture.
Je ne le dis pas par orgueil.
I'm not saying that because of pride.
Mais la question que je me pose aujourd'hui,
But the question I ask myself
si nous
today
étions les
is
premiers,
that if we're first,
comment se passe-t-il alors qu'aujourd'hui que nous semblons être les derniers?
how can we explain how come that we are now the last? And the answer is
À voir évidemment avec notre passé récent.
we have to relate to our recent past.
L'impérialisme occidental, le colonialisme,
Colonialism or Western action
des ordres internationaux qui ont suivi.
has impacted us.
Les régimes de vérité
Different regimes that went through
et de la moralité
and morality
ont été toujours
have always been
un peu partiels.
partial.
Parce qu'on regarde l'Occident sur l'homme noir,
And as we look at them,
un peu, les Anglais disent jaundice, biaisé.
try to
Mais
take
je
a
ne suis pas
step
là
back.
aujourd'hui pour condamner les autres.
But I'm not trying to say that and try to make a
À l'intérieur,
compare to others. I want us to look within
sont à notre horizon.
that what we have within us and try to look into the future.
Lié évidemment aux structures d'inégalité qui existent dans le monde.
And we try to compare with the now structure that are in the world
À la façon dont le monde fonctionne, mais pas
and see how the world function or works is not necessarily the way we see or want to us to work.
aujourd'hui.
Today,
Nous constatons le rétrécissement symbolique de l'Afrique, c'est-à-dire que l'Afrique
we
s'efface et les Africains du continent de la diaspora
we notice the restraint of Africa while Africans are
semblent avoir disparu.
not behaving the way they should be and losing our culture and treasures and values.
On a vraiment
We-
l'intention de se poser la question
We have to ask ourselves
que se passera demain de l'Afrique
what will be happening
si nous ne participons
of
pas
Africa today
à ces
or
régimes
tomorrow if we don't take measures
si nous ne
now,
participons pas
if we don't participate
des algorithmes
in other things that
à
can,
l'intelligence artificielle.
or the African intelligence, artificial intelligence.
Force est de reconnaître,
We have to admit that
même quand vous voyez au Soudan aujourd'hui,
although we are enlightened today, we have to look for
où ils nous abandonnent.
better things, and that's right.
Mais c'est parce que quelque part,
But it's because
nous avons un peu oublié.
we try to forget our past.
Nous avons lentement rendu nos souverainetés aux autres.
We have slowly but surely given away our lands to others.
On le fait
We did it
parce que les gens ont toujours trouvé
because others have always thought that the necessity of urgency to use our exigencies or urgencies or requests. And we go slowly and we try to leave way to that.
nos volontés ne comptent pas.
And I'm not, etc.
Ces impératifs qu'on nous donne,
These imperatives that impose to us,
etc.,
etc.,
sont codés comme si
are coded as if
ils appartenaient à la moralité.
we belong to their morality, we belong to them. We have no other limits.
Compétence universelle.
We have universal competence, like in the past.
On imagine que les Africains ne sont jamais intéressés.
We try to believe that Africans have never been interested in it. However,
Il y a quelque chose de pire encore que le rétrécissement symbolique de l'Afrique.
there is something worse that is happening in Africa.
Par ses intellectuels,
Is the abandonment of Africa by its elites, either by necessity
soit par cynisme
or by cynicals
et ou par opportunisme.
or by opportunism, meaning they want to go for opportunity.
Je ne veux pas me fixer
I cannot fix these sentiments
sur les sentiments qui s'y attachent et leurs effets.
and their effects.
Moi, ce qui m'intéresse,
What I'm concerned with is that many hopeful and engaged Africans
ils meurent dans les eaux en allant chez les autres.
that are not able to meet with others across borders.
Mais il y a quelque chose de plus grave que ça.
But there's something worse than that.
Nous,
We, graduates and African churches, we all have a continental structure. Egyptian lecturers and researchers, Ethiopians and Somalian academics or professionals are not in sustained conversations with the South African, Namibians, and Congolese. Nor do Guinean thinkers converse with those of Niger, Chad, Cameroon, or else. They all inhabit disciplinary trenches from which they write and for journals set up mostly for hours. We don't never take our request or our requirement. We always take for others. We consider others' requirements and necessities than ours. And it's not wicked. I'm saying it not from a wicked standpoint, no, but from an open mind and a very African, deeply rooted person. We have to understand that in most of the cases, but the pragmatism and solution that we are looking for should be generated outside Africa, and that's what relegates us to the second position or even the last. That's why I want to speak as an intellectual. And African intellectuals is no different from those of our young athletes, because there is no structure to retrain us here. There is nothing in such of infrastructure to keep us home and to be able to blossom out. This is an issue, and but the problem could be solved. That problem could be resolved, but we need to talk about it. Our young artists, they go to Europe. They have neither the structure nor anything else to help them innovate and blossom out at home. That's why some people call it coherent, or other people call it globalization, but it's also called cosmopolitanism or transnationalism and the like. To the youth, in my audience today, I must confess that the elders, of which I am one of them, have not given them the scholarly and methodological tools and frameworks in order to confront the failures in Africa and in Africa of Africa. Sometimes we miss the point to get to the concrete action, to get the practical action. Because on the Twitter that I saw, the concern or the issue of what will happen in Africa in the future, and where will be the Africans? How will they get out of this? How will they be able to cope? In other terms or words, we are being marginalized and subjected to drastic other forms. In another word or elucidation, we can pose the problem differently. How will we be able to continue to teach our children the way that we do? Does it serve our academic program at schools? The content, will that be useful to us? Recently, I'm not saying it but I said no to some of the curricula, given the remarks that I made. And I want to speak here as an intellectual. How can we get to, in my specific domain of specialization, political science, I have nothing to do more in that respect, except that it's not the only thing that others want to control us or study our curricula or study. I taught that science in other Western countries. I did some conferences and seminars in other countries all over the world, in Japan and others. In the meantime, I taught in Europe and others. So today I am here to speak about my professional experience and what I have shared with others. If you are in my field in political science in the United States, you will know this first discipline of political science in American politics. Replace the adjective with British, French, Swedish, Spanish, and the like. You have the equivalent field. In the main field of political science, in the field of American politics, tells the story of American institution and development, federal and local, as it relates to all dimensions of constitutional, collective, and individual activities like bankings. But we never talk about slavery or exploitation of others, etc. We are like American indigenous, because they want to speak about themselves otherwise. I am concerned with it. The second domain in political science is the political theory. If I go in this kind of respect, this will be essentially a mental journey through time of the archives, canons, human events leading to the ascension of Europe and the West. This is a traditional pitch by the European Renaissance, as originating in ancient Greece and Rome, which provide Europe with their science. And after that, they refer to other texts. We never say that moral technologies have benefited from it. The idea that Greek belong to others, or Europe belong to our European and others, is a false idea. And we Africans, sometimes we say that this is coming from elsewhere, or Europe or others. I will come back to that. But it's not true. The canals are theirs, but archives are ours. The third domain in political science is international relations. The role of international relations is to give the impression that it is ethically coherent to treat human beings differently on account of imperial needs and based on geography, race, culture, and others, and we try to justify it by other regimes of rights, and everything that they possess has been God-given. But what is most important is that the geography or atlas or the culture of a region is embedded in also in political science. And when we go to class, we talk about realism. We have to keep. They do not have the right to treat us different. They have the right to treat us differently, not the way they want to. We maintain this fiction in law, that the deeds for law, solidarity, and others, etc., can possibly, in the level is completely different. Violence is different. Conquest of others is another concept, is different. Wars or territorial occupation has another understanding or connotation to them. In this position, they consider as legitimate if not necessary. The last field of political science is comparative politics. In the United States, this field
On les appelle, je suis dans un d'entre eux, African Studies,
is reinforced by regional studies department.
Asian Studies, Latin American Studies.
And that reflects the ambition of the United States government and American philanthropy to give effect to the American century.
D'un homme qui a fait son argent en Chine,
Someone
et qui a
who
déclaré
got
le 20e siècle, le siècle
worked
des
or
étoiles.
studied in China will have another vision.
Et donc,
And so,
la préoccupation dans cette classe-là,
the preoccupation in this case is
qui ne sait pas se gouverner,
the state, who did not know, who does not know how to govern or rule himself,
en fait, ses femmes, etc., etc.
will be left aside and will go astray.
La plupart des Africains qui étudient les sciences sociales et
Most Africans who study political
sont
science
donc orientés vers des compréhensions.
are therefore oriented toward
On ne leur dit pas
very fixed understanding of the world. They are not told in political theory that the authors whose ideas now form Western canons were in direct conversation with Africans.
Je vous dirais par exemple que depuis
We know, for instance, that
8 siècles après,
from indigenous onward,
je n'ai pas dit on visitait l'Afrique,
major Greek philosophers spent extensive times in Africa.
conversé avec les Africains. Aucun d'entre eux n'est allé en Suède.
No one went elsewhere except in Africa. I'm not saying it for the sake of pride or whatsoever, but that's the fact.
Ce sont les nôtres.
It's true, and it's our land and our experience and our story that's been used.
Entre l'Afrique et la production des connaissances qui sont également occultées.
And other things in Africa has been complicated.
Dans nos textes et programmes académiques,
For example, in
personne ne parle
other texts, nobody speaks about
ne
us.
dira jamais
Or they will never say
Timbuktu
that Timbuktu
est dans une particulière lancée
is
qui a commencé dans l'Empire abbasside.
Timbuktu started in the Abbasi
L'âge
Empire,
musulman.
where we talk about the
Et que
Muslims.
quand l'Empire abbasside est tombé,
And when it went down,
on ramené cette expérience
they tried to bring out this experience
en Andalousie.
in Andalusia.
Quand les morts ont été chassés de là,
And when they have been sacked from that place,
c'est là que le fondateur des Mourides au Sénégal
that's why the founder of Mourid in Senegal today
a un poète prêtre, a un poète perse.
has a Persian poetry.
Nous n'avons jamais été en dehors des canons,
But we have never been outside that.
des archives plutôt.
The archives will speak about it.
Nous ne sommes pas là. Nous avons été pendant des siècles en contact avec les Européens,
For centuries, we have been in touch with Europeans,
chrétiens, musulmans, etc.
be it Muslim or Christians.
La question des archives est intéressante parce que ça nous rapproche
The-
un peu
The question or the issue about the archive is extremely important because it's all about our
Par exemple,
heritage and history.
dans nos réflexions disciplinaires,
For example, in our disciplinary things,
que les Mamelouks en Égypte ont restitué la méritocratie,
they will never tell that in Egypt,
accéder au pouvoir à travers le mariage.
in Egyptian instituted the meritocracy,
On ne nous dit pas que les populations du Sahel
they will never tell us that
avaient
the
des
Sahelian
orientées vers la substance au-delà des frontières.
population has been oriented toward the borders and
On ne
frontiers.
nous dit pas
Will never tell us
200 ans avant les États-Unis, il y a eu
that
un palmarès.
200 years before the United States,
On ne nous dit pas que Haïti,
they will never tell us that Haiti,
la conception des droits de l'homme,
the conception of human rights, has been embedded or imaginated in Haiti.
mais dans l'orgueil
But
des Occidentaux, on nous dit que ça c'est droit économique et social.
but the Europeans will use it otherwise and say something different about the reality.
L'obligation des gouvernants de savoir,
The obligations of leading
en Guinée,
people to know
je ne vais pas rappeler aux gens,
that Guinea,
pas entre Sundiata et Balafasake.
that Sundiata Keita
Droit de la liberté d'expression sont apparus chez nous autant de Sundiata.
fought against Sumangarata and he won over it.
Que Dar es Salaam
That Dar es Salaam
et les Wangara ont existé,
and Wangara insisted long
l'Europe n'imagine le cosmopolitanisme.
alongside
Que les
the
peuples du
code
Torodo,
that
en
people of Congo
1776,
in
la
the
révolution
1776
américaine,
on the revolution of Pearl in the
interdisait
third,
fortement
which occurred in the same year as the American
cette
Revolution,
seule branche de prise de décision ou d'individu.
either within the branch of our decision making
Parmi les Almamiers qui choisissaient les chefs et postulaient
We are not reminded enough to the fact that before Sunjata defeated Sumangolo Kante, that Africa was nearly on par with Britain in alchemy, in that the Yoruba in Nigeria produce blue glass. You know, what is really aching in the science domain, the Yoruba of Nigeria they obtain and produce blue glass nearly a century and a half before its appearance in Europe. We have to tell the truth. There is much social, moral, scientific, and institutional experimentations on this continent to inspire us or to cause us reject the dictatorship. We need to move forward from our clutches and our experience. And we have to find solutions adjusted and adapted to our realities, etc. If we know our own history and start from that, we'll make a positive path right to get to the future, and we will not accept what is being imported. There is nothing in our past or now that to teach us that we need to kill ourselves and so on and so forth. We need to live as one people and try to be an harmonious people and work out together for development. I'm not here to say counter truths or whatsoever. I want to what I'm saying, we have enough space. The separation of powers, all of these governance and ruling management and styles is all deeply rooted in Africa. We are the one who gave birth to these. The idea that the body of an African person should keep its integrity. I'm not going to repeat what I said in the past. The ideas and institutions are in our hands. The affair of Mali, Bamako, or could be found out if we are asking questions. For example, I give if you go on Andalusia today, there are scientists who tell you that the problem between the herders and the cultivators in Mali you know who's keeping these cultures? Because the management of Wadi does not take benefit the dwellers. We cannot take water and air as our own. It's a God-given thing that we have to share. But people will fight against it and try to put us at war. Why am I saying all of this? Simply to tell you that none of our conflicts, internal conflicts, and linked to the management of our resources, that we miss the idea of expressing a constitutional element. And of course, we refer to others, France, the United States, to manage and deal with our own issues and problems. People come to tell us here that the property is, and they tell us that in francophone countries that the land belongs to the government or the state. In France, by the time they say that, land belonged to the clergy, to human being, and the French Revolution came to that. They said that the land belongs to the government or state because this is the only party that can sell it to them and that they can be able to exploit it. No. So land belongs to the state or government to give it to others. Whereas we can have a public utility land or services organized on them for the goodwill of the population. And we take it as it is because we refuse to think. And I'm telling you, I'm not saying it against Mr. Vladimir Putin or whoever, whatsoever person in there. Mr. Nasser from Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, put an end to the imperial fantasy that Africans bore no relation to the environment that was constitutive of property. That lie, which was given form by the lies of John Locke, died when Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. Likewise, the post-World War II idea on self-determination had been construed by Western power to be no more than a rephrasing of the right of natives to dispose of themselves. And Patrice Lumumba paid the price for challenging that notion. And his word was nothing but the right of people to dispose of their own land. And self-determination, that meaning as today. And the credit for it was unsurprisingly given to Nikita Khrushchev, who sponsored the applicable United Nations Resolution 1514. The declaration on that move. That did not mean that we didn't have the right to choose our own chief, our own leaders, on our own land. We didn't have the right to that. The different governments of Ethiopia and Liberia before the International Court of Justice did not, no pun intended, to align international legal jurisprudence in line with post-colonial realities than any other actions. Of course, look at Japan today. They have the same case. People did not rise all of a sudden, so we decide of all. No, they didn't do that. It's only African who did that. The judge or the prosecutor. I'm telling all of this because I would like you to understand that Africans have the right to dispose of themselves and their land, and they have to think how to do that. We have changed this word, but it is never mentioned in the books. They have not risen up like that all of a sudden from Harvard University, for example, to do this. Let me get to the population. I started saying that we don't speak much to ourselves. We don't have an instructional map or thing that can lead us, to orient us. Our leader here today, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, is part of these leaders that has enlightened us and show us all our values that can be a good and heritage. Identify our values and rights can be fruitful. President Mbeki was preceded by other predecessors like William Tolbert and others, good African thinkers, Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré. And President Mbeki is one of the rarest, except from Marcus Garvey, who believed in the idea of African Renaissance. The foundation of President Mbeki is one top notch that should be supported in that respect. He believes that we're not trying to compare Africans. But what I want to say is that NEPAD and the Renaissance, African Renaissance, contain some elements that are deeply rooted in our values and that can help us progress and be developed. I'm not here to defend President Thabo Mbeki's positions. I'm not here either to destroy things. But today, President Mbeki is inspiring and should be a good leader and role model to us. He wants us to rehabilitate our own Africa and the land and the African people. He wants us to be as one people. It all depends on our institution as well. We are not the only one. Mr. Malcolm said we need to have a very strong structure that can not only help us speak about our values and our own tradition. I'm not saying that we have to do like others, but we can have something original and that can originate from Africans and be solved on our own, like cases in Somalia. We have nothing in place to support initiatives of different governments or the researchers or university graduates or artists or lecturers. When someone tries to do that or initiate something positive, they denounce him, and Radio France International or other international media will consider it otherwise. But we need to have an institution in Africa that will govern Africans. The idea of that kind of institution is not original. It's not new. We say sometimes that between 1700 it will not stop that. They're saying that we had the French Academy, nor the British African, the learning of this, the collection of our memories. We should not repeat the same mistakes. The idea of a collective idea or collective people, each in his own understanding, modern sensibilities. As I say, the French Academy was created in 1666 and the British Academy in 1600. Japan, under Emperor Meiji, sent its most important scholars in all knowledge fields and disciplines in Britain, German, and elsewhere to acquaint themselves with modern practices in science, technology, and others in order to advance his country. The US simply took land from India to allocate as land grants universities with the specific agenda of aiming America in excelling in what land and treasure afforded it. In Turkey too, Mustafa Kemal Pasha, also known as Ataturk, helped push his country in the direction of the Young Turk over the young Ottomans to modern Turkish government, life, culture, and the like. Before the end of his term, he tried to put something in place that became an heritage. Different African disciplines should be, each of them came to answer a specific question. Thus, the discipline of geography, for example, which emerged as field of study between 1535 and 1545, in response to the so-called age of discovery, the new anthropology between 1585 and 1595 in anticipation of settlements in the New World, political economy, 1605, 1615, after British East India and others, how to organize all of this. I'm not against science, no, not at all. The problem is that we have to define the way that we Africans should understand science and practice it. It's not that we don't have science in Africa, we don't want to practice it. But it should be done the way it should be. When I told our task, we Africans, I mean, is to think or to innovate, to imagine the knowledge, so to speak, and instead of copying others, we have that intelligence and that gut. It's not impossible. I'm not only saying because some of our friends would say we consider it otherwise. No. New science. We have to encourage young people, but we never get to it if we don't talk to one another, if we don't share human sciences, social sciences everywhere in the world. Has been put in place and supported by institutions, and people have talked to one another, have put in place strong and solid infrastructure and institutions to continue and promote it and develop it. The African solidarity, the true African solidarity, is mental. I'm telling you that. It's moral. I'm not here to make any assertion, but Africa needs an academy of its own. That's my point and that's my word. And Africa has the solution to that. We will not continue to quench fires here and there in Africa. And Africans even do not know how to associate their peers in order to solve our problems in the African way. I just want to remind you of something. After the 50s, we had a national conference. Everybody said alternance, meaning alternatives or shifting of power. No one. When, for example, a car broke, we don't change the car automatically. We try to repair the car, try to see how to fix it and try to make it our own and move forward. Particularly in Africa, we have to consider that idea and see how we can move forward. When we say, for example, like microphone, please. Yeah. We cannot appoint the Minister of Justice and the General Prosecutor together at the same time. We need to see how things work. We have to think. We cannot grab things here and there randomly like that. We have to be able to stand and sit down and think, and we have to be able to anticipate different conflicts and fights in Africa, and considering our own resources, human resources, and any other one. The African wisdom requires us to sit down and talk like we used to do in the past with our ancestors, and try to see how we can solve our own issues. If we are able to do that, we can solve the issue in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in other. I'm not saying that we have to reject the Western values and other things immediately. No. But there is no African blueprint or no African touch in any of these. We have to try to solve things from the African perspective as well, and which is sometimes very paying. We don't leave others to solve our issues when we can do it. It's from all our common interest. They try to present us their models and realities, but does it match with ours? Not necessarily. They may have some good things, but we should be able to promote ours and see how we can fix ours to our own benefit and our own good. For years, we have been mistaken by thinking that our ideas do not match with our... No, it doesn't work this way. It's not the problem of science, or we're not matching with that. Thoughts and ideas could be true, and they could be taught in different schools and considered otherwise, but our realities are also different, and we should be able to match with these. Again, Aimé Césaire, Frantz Fanon, Albert Memmi, Malcolm X, and Steve Biko were not mistaken in making the connection between enslavement and the capture of the minds of the enslaved by the enslaver. Think of Mali. These conflicts. But the right of possessing a land and the right of doing different is different. In Mali, the right started with the founding of a land. We are all confronted with the same problem, and we should speak from the same voice, one single voice. Our children should mimic us in that respect and follow in the footsteps. Archives that others have, these are theirs. Miss Aminata Traoré was partly correct in the viol de l'imaginaire. For instance, he in the Francophone France has provided a needed institutional infrastructure of collaboration between French and African universities. But we should find out the right word and the right ways. We will never develop Africa. We will never have African Renaissance if we don't have the right thought and the right institution and the right people. We have to learn. We have to finish and stop from apprenticeship. Anybody comes to power can innovate, but we never gave the means to Africans or leaders in Africa to work out the way they should, and we have given way to corruption. We should not be spectators or watchers. And the only way not to do that is to give hands to hand to one another and try to sit and think on our word. Our traders and businessmen, our artists, our young people need that, and need means to work out and get to that direction. We need some time to sit down and rethink that. Rethink our institutions, rethink our way of doing things, our manners. The academy that I'm speaking about, how can we possibly have it? We have state people and we have resourceful people. We can put in place this institution. Everything I have promised to President Thabo Mbeki, His Excellency, before the end of July, I think we can have this reality can become true. And we will have a word today, and we can promise President Thabo Mbeki that by the end of July we can have this come true. Because it exists already. In fact, we have the situated by Mr. President, and we think that the foundation of Mr. Thabo Mbeki should be intact, and it should be a workable institution. If His Excellency the President accept a reposition or repositioning, organizing a forum between those who have the capital and the money in the industries, professors and others, no other intellectual group and others can come and counterattack them. And that the academy that I have in Guinea is not a government project. It's not a project of a Ministry of Education. Science does not belong to the government or to the state. It's the scientists, it's their own. The intellectual and elite, the researchers and the university graduates that should come there to think and find solutions to our problem. I'm not excluding the government, no. They can have some contribution, but African academic should be working jointly with the state and the government to find solutions to our problems. We're not going to ask any government or any African to ask to give some money, but whoever would give would tell everybody, this is our own common heritage, do what you can. But it will not go through a single president or a single statement. The academy should not be in South Africa or Morocco or wherever in Africa. We'll put it either in Cape Verde or what? We don't want it to be dominated by only one single person. The academy depend. The Thabo Mbeki library will be 3 antennas. We already propose that every year, President Thabo Mbeki will find ourselves somewhere around a single topic to be debated or discussed. Intellectuals, humanitarians, even head of states who can come and discuss that with us. Only one topic at a time, natural science, political science, geography, whatsoever, but one single topic discussed at one time. Nothing here in Guinea here that prevent us from doing that. And I'm sure we can get to it. With the blessing and support of President Thabo Mbeki, we'll get to it. The foundation works. We have the intellectuals and the elite for that, the human resource capable to do that. Who are not even me. It will be other people. But the African continent needs its intellectuals and its human resources. We cannot export someone for that. So in July, we'll try to see how we can implement this project and make it a reality. Before we invite him here, we call it the commitment of Conakry or the Conakry Convention. It's not a state convention. We owe that to our children, to our people, to everybody. We have to do that. We owe it to everybody. Nature has not given us all of these, and we will deprive ourselves for that. So when I said I would come today, I did not show it, but I am probably a single person to continue promoting that, but it's all together we can get to that. His Excellency President Thabo Mbeki, Excellency Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs, you have the mental capacity, you have the mental thought, you have if you think that we can do it for our Mr. Jean Tolbe, Bismarck, Ataturk, Francis Bacon did for the continent, why not us? So let us accept to assemble and gather. You give us the space to say what we want and do what we want. We'll leave you with an heritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Korobegi. Merci, Professeur, for your enlightening and thought-provoking lecture. A round of applause for his words and wisdom and inspiration. It is now time for some reflection on the lecture and on the role of Thabo Mbeki's African School of Public and International Affairs in catalyzing Africa's renewal. Please welcome Professor Edith Paswana.
His Excellency, Patron of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Honorable Minister in the Transitional Government of Guinea, the Chair of the Foundation, Ms. Geraldine Fraser Moleketi, in absentia, the Chair of Council, Mr. Maboya of UNISA, the Vice Chancellor of UNISA, Professor Lengabula, the Ambassador of South Africa to Guinea, Professor Solimullo, members of the Diplomatic Corps present here. Allow me to stand on existing protocols and say, ladies and gentlemen, bonjour. Je m'appelle Edith Paswana, Professor and Director, African Development, University of South Africa, and the Thabo Mbeki School of Public and International Affairs. Is it fine? Okay, thank you. Je suis très honorée de participer à ce moment historique de notre continent. Je vous apporte les saluts chaleureux de Africa du Sud.
The African word and the African common heritage.
Warm greetings from the team school and UNISA, one of the oldest institutions in South Africa. UNISA is one of the oldest distance education in the world. And this year, on the 24th of January 2023, UNISA will be celebrating 150th birthday of existence. It is the mother to all universities in South Africa. So this year we are looking forward to see you in South Africa. So the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs is one of the largest and recent innovations of the partnerships that the Thabo Mbeki Foundation enjoys with UNISA. And it's a perfect model of the private-public partnerships in achieving the much-needed African Renaissance. The school emerged out of a conversation with several former heads of states that tasked President Mbeki to establish an entity that would train a critical mass of change agents and thought leaders on the continent for the social, political, cultural, economic renewal of the continent and its people from the Pan-African paradigm. President Mbeki, believing in the value of education and our institution in the pursuit of African Renaissance, and trusted UNISA to contribute and to incubate this initiative since 12 October 2009. And over the years, the school has evolved to form a premier school of significance on the continent. My role today is just short, and I'm requested to reflect on the lecture of Professor Siba, and also to look at this lecture in relation to the school that the Thabo Mbeki Foundation has founded at UNISA. As we can see, this is a school of significance, a very premier school, which will educate and not instruct Africans towards self-determination, as Professor Koboki has been saying. And in short, Professor Siba, I'm saying that the foundation of the school is premised on such a collaboration that believes in the logic of actors of development, not your normal actors of development as predicated by the Bretton Woods institutions, which were a state actor in the market, but a conglomeration of all these actors as you have espoused them here on the platform. And in that way, I am concurring with what you have been proposing here. And my role as I reflect in this lecture is a powerful platform for all Africans to pitch ideas which can be implementable towards the renewal of Africa, or what we term the African Renaissance. And I'm privileged to be here in Guinea as our first entry into the region and to be responding to a very profound lecture with key actions which Prof. Siba gave this morning, this afternoon, and I must first commend him for coming with practical solutions to the problems of Africa as a start. And this, for me, is commendable. We have been theorizing for too long, and this lecture is offering an opportunity for action, imagination, imaginaries as Africans. And these are some of the themes that I'm distilling out of this lecture. A few points which I would also indicate how the TM school at UNISA can take advantage on this process. And Prof. Siba, in his lecture, he begins with a provocation of, if we were first, you may ask, then why does it seem like we are the last today? And to which he responds, a good deal of it has to do with how we understand ourselves in this contemporary moment. And this provocative lecture calls for all of us as Africans to do self-introspection and be wary of the threats that lies ahead, because of the world is not stagnant, but the world is evolving, and there are threats that are coming. A profound lecture indeed, and I will quickly point a few aspects that registered and resonates with the ideals of this new African school called the TM School, which seeks to be a magnet of excellency globally. And as we imagine this school, because this school is not a school for South Africans, it's not a school for South Africa, but it's a continental school, a continental African school that every one of us in this hall today will need to embrace and be able to be part of this new invention at UNISA and the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. Professor Siba, you have underscored the need for a truly African university, not universities in Africa. And I'm going to dwell on this point because the imagination and the conceptualization of the TM school is premised on the fact of providing an education that will liberate the African and be able to imagine the future together. African institutions, including our universities, many of them on the continent, even though we call them African universities, are at very best westernized universities located in Africa. And by westernized universities, I am talking about universities whose canon of thought and knowledge structures are located in the West. And particularly if you imagine the social sciences and political sciences, that's supposed to be able to bring about the needed development that we need. And perhaps let me also emphasize that the knowledge foundations of a westernized university, which we might even be calling African universities today, is predominantly racist and sexist. And Prof. Siba has used a metaphor of political science and international relations to adequately demonstrate this. The role of international relations, as he says, gives impression that it is ethically coherent to treat human beings differently on account of imperial needs and based on geography, race, culture, and religion, and I close quote. So political science, in his view, is full of erasure without acknowledging that there was an engagement with Africans and other citizens of the world in its construction. And he uses the American political science and international relations to be able to show that. The second aspect is that Africa needs to be able to embrace its own diversity and operate from that premise. And unless we take the notion of diversity and pluriversality here in Africa, we may find ourselves not succeeding in achieving the much needed African Renaissance. And as he said in the lecture, we need this to be able to groom future generations, and we need to allow these contradictory and convergent intellectual movements to work together to imagine the future. Every knowledge system and thought processes in the world start from the premise of self-affirmation, and I think he has taken time to show us, using Greece, using Rome, using Asia, and all other civilizations that we can imagine outside of Europe and the West, and to which he has given us all these examples. For Africa, self-determination is not a privilege, it's a must, it's something that we should be doing and we need to do. And the question is, how can we be able even to imagine how to defend our African imaginaries and imaginations if we don't pursue this idea of self-determination as Africans? The problem with Africa as it encounters other worlds or other civilizations is that Africans are the ones who are expected to erase their Africanness when they encounter other civilization. And I think this is what this lecture also emphasized today. The other aspect that was really emphasized in the lecture is the idea of the locus of enunciation. From where are Africans speaking from? What is our locus of enunciation? Do we speak from the place called Africa? Do we speak from the mind of an African? Or do we speak as other worlds are dictating for us on what we need to do? And this he underscored very adequately in the lecture. And therefore, it's incumbent of us as Africans to begin to imagine an Africa from our own vantage point of the locus of enunciation, which is Africa, this continent. The other aspect that he mentioned is the shrinking, the symbolic shrinking of Africa and Africans, which is continuing. And put otherwise, we talk of invisibilization, we talk of also erasure of Africa and Africans on the global map. And this has to do predominantly with the contestation of being at a global level. Because this erasure of Africa and Africans, even on the continent, and the descended diaspora, it's becoming a big problem in terms of the type of knowledges, publications that we also want to take out. And it is upon us as Africans to excavate, to begin to excavate, because in the lecture, he has actually given us a long list of the discoveries, a long list of the achievements of Africa. But the question is, today, where are they and what are we doing with those discoveries, those achievements that we have had in the past? He also points to the abandonment of Africa by its intellectuals, and for this he's saying it's either pessimism, cynicism, or expediency. And my question is whether we have African intellectuals abandoned Africa, or are they just following a wrong script? Because it's possible that we might be thinking we are doing the work, because when I look at publications and the work and the knowledge that is produced on the continent, it has been increasing. But the question is, whose script are we writing? Whose questions are we responding to as Africans as well? And this also, he tries to juxtapose with the polarization that we see on the continent, according to regions, according to languages, and I think even the minister touched on that. And until we have the courage as Africans to come together and imagine Africa with one voice, some of these needed ingredients that we were given today towards the African Renaissance might not be able to be achieved. Again, the lecture also touched on why Africa is not able to benefit from its talent and skills. Why are Africans everywhere? Whether they are athletes, whether they are artists, whether they are academics, we don't find them benefiting Africa. And why is the situation like this? To which he attributes the lack of superstructure and infrastructure to operate at home. So even the idea of globalization, cosmopolitan, in many cases, while it's a good idea, it's not benefiting Africans. And therefore the question is whether should we be actually promoting those ideas that really put us as Africans out of the margins of society. The idea of a shared wisdom over centuries is also a noble idea that came out of this lecture. However, we need to also imagine that the global power structures are asymmetrical in nature and are built on knowledges of the West, as I've already indicated earlier. And unless Africa and Africans begin to view themselves as peers within this unequal partnership that is in the world, we might not be able to even reach the African Renaissance that we are imagining. Of course, there were some takeaways that one has been trying to take from the lecture, and what our school, a school such as the one that is called the Thabo Mbeki African, a school of public and international affairs, can do to make some of these ideals in the lecturers, of this theory in the lectures, practical. First of all, a school of this nature needs to unapologetically, deliberately seek to insert an African canon, knowledge, system, methodologies, philosophies, and make them central to global knowledge systems. And in my views, Africans should begin to imagine the idea of a pluriversity rather than a university. Because the current university that we are working on is premised on one knowledge system that everyone should marshal after. Therefore, to think of a pluriversity is to think about Chinese knowledge, Indian knowledge, African knowledge, all finding equal stature within the academy in a university or a school of this nature. And Africa is the best place to make this ideal a possibility because of the diversity that Africa has in the world. Because young Africans are getting impatient about this ideal, and all that we need is courage. And today this lecture has given us some of the tools on how we can go around making this an ideal. If Africans could move away from amnesia, as he was talking, as he was giving the lecture about our amnesia, to forget the histories, to forget even the achievements that Africa has, and where we tend to recognize certain ideas, norms that are not in tandem with us. And this school, for us, in the lecture, I think you have heard him talking about the Sahel and some of the things that were preventable in that area, if we relied on our institutions and relied on practices to resolve disputes, which involves land, territory, and some of these natural resources that you can think of. And in Africa, as he mentions, access to resources is predicated by the principles of Ubuntu, human solidarity, which dictates that access to resources cannot be managed through boundaries, or they are not bound. And if we had actually went back to think about this, we wouldn't be having the situation that we have at the Sahel. And it is precisely, I'm not a lawyer, but he was saying, is constitutional dispositions which erase this principle of human solidarity, Ubuntu, and humanity that Africans share over time. Because in Africa, we don't say because when there is a river, we say there is a line or there's a border, you need to pay something to come and get the water this side. People can show. And the school has introduced a focus area, particularly to deal with some of these issues, called livelihoods and natural resource management as a focus area of study for Africans to begin to imagine this from their vantage point or from their locus of enunciation. Prof has also talked about the absence of institutions that coalesce our efforts, the lack of them. We lack structures that allow us to convene more robustly, he argued, to which he's proposing for a multi-stakeholder structure that is independent of state and strategically located not on the hegemons like South Africa, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and all these hegemons of Africa you can think of, Egypt. And I concur with him because the current structures, due to their history and origin, will not be able to serve Africans well because of these foundations. But what is not clear from his lecture is whether he's advocating for overall of the current systems and institutions, which that is not coming clear for me. But what is clear is that he's suggesting that we need to do that and it does not have to have state inside. And Prof. Siba was short of saying that perhaps NEPAD, APRM, and all these powerful structures, noble structures that were imagined, the state was not the rightful custodian for them. And perhaps we should have worked with the conglomeration that he is proposing of all stakeholders, whether they are artists, researchers, and all these stakeholders and actors that he mentioned in the lecture. And I like the idea that science is not an enemy. Science is not an enemy to some of these proposals, because in his own ways, our multiplicity and pluralism may be daunting, but pluralism, diversity, non-conformism, and more importantly, transgression of orthodoxies are not enemies of sciences. They are its friends, and I close quote. So the TM School has been founded to excavate and thus hidden knowledge and to be at the forefront of invention and logic of discovery. And in its conception, the idea of transdisciplinarity was precisely to be able to do that, to begin to imagine the African Renaissance in a transdisciplinary manner. And I think the lecture also touched on this predominantly. And the school also seeks to produce graduates that will contribute to global discoveries. Prof. Siba has already chronicled a long list of these discoveries. Young Africans, he says, should be part of the discoveries in the fifth industrial revolution in a school such as the one that we can have that. And if we can be able to come together with this initiative that he was proposing, we will be able to generate knowledge that will bring about efficiencies and effectiveness in the public sector, also post-COVID-19 that we had, or many of the pandemics that have passed and that are yet to come. And this new initiative that he proposed will help us also to establish an African continent-wide approach to teaching, learning, and training. The school will take seriously some of the proposal in shaping and strengthening our curriculum. And the school has already engaged with universities yesterday here at Ghana. At Guinea, my apologies, at Guinea. The significance of collaboration and partnership was also emphasized in such an initiative. So, in a nutshell, the TM School is for all of us, and I am here to say these lectures are a good platform for us to imagine what we can do with the current education system to ensure that we provide the future generation with methodologies, philosophies, and tools to be able to imagine the future together. I thank you. Merci.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Paswana. Your insights and reflection were invaluable. And now, to close this significant event, I am honored to call upon Mr. Max Bakwana, CEO of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, to deliver closing remarks.
Thank you, Fatwa. Ladies and gentlemen, you will be very happy to know that I'm not a professor. So I'm not professing anything. I'm not going to keep anybody for that long on this podium, especially taking to account that we've got a concert, which I think is very important for all of us. But, Minister, I need to say, as the Thabo Mbeki Foundation and UNISA, we are very, very glad today that we're returning to this place, and a place to which we belong, to follow in the footsteps of Governor Mbeki, on the resilience of Nelson Mandela, to pay homage to the land that produced the compatriots of Oliver Tambo, such compatriots and companions Ahmed Sekou Toure and Diallo Telly. This place that was once a home to Kwame Nkrumah, a home to Amilcar Cabral, who inspired many of us for the total liberation of our continent. Even closer to some of us, this is a place that was once a home to our mother and grandmother, Miriam Zenzile Makeba, whom we honor immediately as we close this session, to which all of you are invited to that concert to honor Mama Miriam. We are glad that we have amongst us President Thabo Mbeki, who continues to command the stars to shine on Africa and remind us that we are the children of the great warriors who never surrendered against the mighty French armies in the Haitian Revolution. We are born of warriors that humiliated the Italian forces against imperialism in the Battle of Adwa in Ethiopia. We are grandchildren of the great warriors who defeated the English imperialists in the Battle of Isandlwana. He gives us confidence that not only Africa can be reborn, that here stands the midwives of an Africa that is reborn. We are grateful, therefore, to our patron for his untiring commitment to a better Africa. We now return to this place exactly to reaffirm our commitment to the ideas and practice of Pan-Africanism, as our forebears did 60 years ago. We are grateful to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Government of Guinea for the manner in which they welcomed us and facilitated our safe arrival in Conakry. We are particularly happy, Minister, that the government has stated its commitment to Pan-Africanism, as was stated by the Supreme Leader, Colonel Mamadou Doumbouya, yesterday to us. And we pray that in the end, a government that the people of Guinea wants is beckoning, and that will be achieved and done peacefully. We wish to thank our lecturer, Professor Siba Grovoki, not only for the intellectual feast that he prepared and provided to us this evening. From this, it is clear that we should be engaged with the rest of the continent in the next 12 months to try and practicalize the issues that Edith has just distilled. We thank Professor Siba for another reason, for being one of the provocateurs that reminded us that our responsibility as a foundation goes beyond the river Limpopo. He did not only make this as a suggestion, but he fully participated in the preparatory activities that led to this event. In him, Mr. President, we found a dependable soldier in our quest to rid our continent of ignorance, of poverty, of burden of disease, and foreign domination. It is also not a cliché to say this would not have been possible without the timeous and generous material intervention of MTN, of Anglo Gold Ashanti, of African Development Bank, of Tellis Holdings, and our dear friend Lansana Savannah. Working with all of you colleagues made us to feel good to be Africans. You have in our eyes destroyed the false dichotomy that the direction and the work to rebuild our continent is the exclusive responsibility of the politician. It is not. It is a collective responsibility of all of us. We are proud to be associated with you and hope that we will continue to do so as we undertake other programs. We also thank the Foundation and the UNISA board for agreeing that we be here today and for the support they have provided to our team as we prepare for this evening. It will be remiss for me not to thank our project team under the guidance and leadership of Lupin Aisa, who led both the Foundation and the TM school teams as they prepare for this event. You guys, in my view, have been phenomenal. But as I was saying to one of our bosses here, Mr. Palazzi, we still have to be at work on Monday. And this appreciation we extend to our program director, who has really led this event in a very professional manner, and she has done a sterling job tonight. More importantly, genuinely, each one of you present in this room and those that are listening at home, you have made our work worthwhile. And thank you for joining us this afternoon or this evening, wherever you are. This is for you. And for that matter, we will also value your feedback as to how we can do this better than we have done today and have done in the past 12 years. We thank in particular the members of the media, as some of those that have traveled far from the bottom of our continent to be here today. I'm glad that we had the type of media houses and media practitioners that have been with us this week in Guinea, making it very clear that they refuse to be mere spectators in the quest for the rebirth of our continent, but have committed themselves to be active participants. I wish to thank everybody that has participated in prayers, in good thoughts, in support. I see many young people here that have been doing the organization, and all of you that are present here today for making this a success that it has become. I just now to return finally to the benediction of the Holy Fathers that were standing here earlier, and we accept their blessings and continue to pray that may our Creator place you, all of you, in the palm of His hands, keep you, protect you, guide you, shine His face on you, and give you peace until we meet again. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, dear friends of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation and representatives of the University of South Africa, we have come to the conclusion to the 13th Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture. I am filled with gratitude for your presence, both physical and virtual, and for your thoughtful engagement with our speakers' insights, and I have no doubt that the richness of today's discourse will inspire each one of us to contribute towards the positive changes our continent seeks. I want to extend our deepest gratitude to Mr. Max Bakwana for his eloquent closing remarks. Allow me to once again express our profound thanks to our generous sponsors, Anglo Gold Ashanti, the African Development Bank, and MTN Group. Your steadfast support and commitment have been an instrumental in the success of this significant event. We appreciate your shared dedication to Africa's development, unity, and intellectual growth. After such an enriching and insightful afternoon, I invite you all to take a break and enjoy some light refreshments. We will reconvene in about 45 minutes for the Mariam Makeba tribute concert as we honor and remember that iconic figure. Let us also appreciate and celebrate the richness of our African culture and heritage. Mariam Makeba, known as Mama Africa, used her music as a tool for social justice, her voice resonating with the struggle and aspirations of our continent. Today, as we pay tribute to her legacy, we also recognize the power of art, culture in uniting us, in telling our stories, and in shaping African identity. Before I close, let me remind each and one of us that the journey towards Africa's Renaissance is a shared responsibility. Let the discussions and the reflections from today's lecture be the catalyst for the action in our respective spaces. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's continue the challenge, inspire each and one another, and together we can create a prosperous Africa we all desire and deserve. Thank you for your time and active participation. Please enjoy the refreshments, and I will look forward to seeing you soon at the Mariam Makeba Tribute Concert.